So how to deal with speed bumps, or traffic calming measures as they're called. Traffic calming measures aren't just speed bumps, you also get chicanes, which is designed to slow you down, and sometimes you get these awkward places where you have to give way to the oncoming car for no reason other than to slow you down. One of the most important things to do before you hit a speed bump is slow down. Now I know that sounds obvious, but what I really mean is make sure you slow down before you hit the speed bump, not as you're going over the speed bump. You want to come off the brake as you go over the speed bump if you want it to be smooth. Well, as smooth as a speed bump can be. This shoe, it's not my shoe, somebody's shoe, is going to demonstrate what I mean. So this shoe is a car, this is the front of the car, this is the rear of the car. When you brake, I'm sure you probably know that the weight goes to the front of the car as you brake. That's why when you brake, you lean forwards. There's more force on the front of the car, meaning the front suspension is already compressed. And if you hit a bump with the front suspension compressed, the suspension can't take the shock. So the whole car takes the shock. It's not good for the car, and it's not very nice for you either. But if you slow down before the bump, and then just before you go over the bump, you come off the brake, that means your suspension has travel left in it, so the wheel can go up as you hit the bump, and the car doesn't go up as much. The next thing to consider is exactly how fast should you be when you go over a speed bump. In my experience, speed bumps are normally suited to between 5 and 15 miles an hour. How fast you actually go depends on how big they are and how harsh they are. So what I tend to do is I tend to start off at around 10 miles an hour. And if it feels harsh, I'll make the speed a bit slower for the next one. Or if it doesn't feel too bad, I may try the next one a little bit faster. But that brings me on to the highway code. Here it is. I'm going to read it out to you. I'm going to read this out word for word for a reason. So it says here, when you approach these features, reduce your speed. Now it means, what it means by these features is traffic calming measures, because speed bumps aren't under speed bumps in the highway code. They're under traffic calming measures. So when you approach a traffic calming measure, reduce your speed. That is what it's saying. What's special about that? That's obvious. Okay, I'm going to get to the point. Let's move forwards in this paragraph. And it says, I'm going to read it again, word for word, maintain a reduced speed along the whole of the stretch of road within the calming measure. And that's the problem, because I know, and over 11 years of teaching people to drive and taking them to driving test in the UK, that if you slow down for a speed bump, and let's say the speed bump required you to do 10 miles an hour for it not to be too harsh, and let's say you slow down, rightly so, to about 10 miles an hour for that speed bump, and then you stayed at 10 miles an hour all the way to the next speed bump for no other reason than the fact the highway code has told you to follow the highway code, yeah, you will fail your test. I know that. I have experience with that. If you do 10 miles an hour all the way through a stretch of road for no other reason than that other than that's another speed bump coming up a bit later, you will fail. So you have to use your common sense. You do want to speed up a bit between the speed bumps. Speed bumps are designed to make you drive slower in that area, but not as slow as you need to be to go over that bump. You will be speeding up in between the bumps a bit. And that brings me on to the bigger picture. Now, the highway code is the law and you should follow it. If you don't follow the law, you can get in trouble. But there isn't a law to solve every possible scenario you're going to come across when you're driving. There's going to be things that happen where you can't go to a book and go, well, what should I do in this situation? That book doesn't exist. So you do have to use your own head and your own human judgment to solve some issues. There's actually quite a famous book by Isaac Asimov. It's called I, Robot, and Will Smith did a film based on the same thing. It's about the 3 laws of robotics and how those rules, or those laws, are designed to prevent the robots from hurting the humans. But the robots follow the rules to the nth degree, to the point where they do end up harming humans. And it's not the only piece of fiction written about the 3 laws of robotics. There's been other people that have done different things, because it is quite a popular topic. And it's not true, it's fictitious. They're pretty silly rules, really. I hope they don't program robots that way. But, you know, although he was a writer, he was a scientist, and a very good one at that. It is a good example of how following rules to the nth degree without human judgment doesn't often lead to good results. So what I'm trying to say is, don't be afraid to use your brain to make decisions. Right, now speed bumps. We have a speed bump up ahead, you can see it. There's normally a white triangle painted on it, but there isn't on this occasion because it's worn out. And I've slowed down to about 10 miles an hour, it says 11 there. And that was quite smooth actually. So the next one I'm going to try at about 15. Here it is here. Again, there's no white triangle on it because it's faded away. I'm doing 13 actually. And that's about my limit for that one, I think. That one wasn't that nice. So about 13 miles an hour I'm going to go with. Got the white arrow, or should I say white triangle painted on this speed bump, down to about 12, 13 miles an hour. And that one's actually a bit softer, so maybe I can go a bit quicker for the next one. I'm speeding up again in between speed bumps, slowing down now. Thought I saw a speed bump there. No, oh, there it is. I can see it now. It's a bit wet, it's harder to see. Slowing down into second gear before the speed bump, off the brake as I go over the speed bump, and then start to accelerate again. That was down to about 10 miles an hour, that one. Probably could go a bit quicker. Slowing down with the brake, off the brake again, 13 miles an hour, 12 miles an hour there, and that's okay. So this one I try a bit quicker, doing about 15 miles an hour now, 14 it says now. There you go. So I just sort of, I feel it, and if it feels harsh, I go slower. If it feels not so bad, then I try it a little bit quicker, but I don't press the brake as I go over the speed bump. Another couple here. I slow down before, off the brake, and then I go over the speed bump. There's different types of speed bumps. Some take up the whole road, and some are just like squares, like these two here, and you've got like a gap in the middle. And some people tend to like go into the middle of the road or try to avoid the bump and keep their speed up. You shouldn't really do that. That's not the point in the speed bump. The whole point of the speed bump is to slow you down. So speed bumps are one type of traffic calming measure, but you also get a chicane, like this thing up ahead now. This here is designed to make you go slow because it's quite an awkward shape, so you have to do quite a bit of steering to go through it. That's just there to slow you down. It's a nicer version of a speed bump because you don't get the horrible bump, but it does force you to go slower. I guess they're more expensive and probably it's not always possible to install them, which is why bumps are the usual thing that is used to slow you down. This is a tricky situation here because I'm downhill and I have a speed bump at the bottom of the hill where I'm going to be still slowing down. So I'm going to still be on the brake as I go over that speed bump. Can't avoid it, but I will do most of the braking before it and do less braking as I go over it, just for comfort. Now here is an example of where speed bumps can get a little bit out of hand. These ones are particularly big. I don't know if you can see this on camera here, but this one is huge and there's a big hole just before it. So in this situation, if you've got a particularly low car, what you can do is come at it like an angle. It's actually setting my reverse sensors off. They're not beeping, but they're coming on the screen there to warn me that there's something in front just because the bump was so high. So if you go at it not directly straight but at an angle, say if you can manage a 45-degree angle, that's going to reduce the overhang over your front wheels, and then when you come down the other end, do the same thing there. That can really help. I'll show you again here. So I'll slow down, big bump, so I'm actually driving towards the curb here. As I go over the bump, I turn to the right and then go down it to going to the right instead of to the left. So here's an example, big speed bump here. I don't actually have to do this, but just to show you, as I go up the bump, I'm pointing left, and as I come down the bump, I'm pointing right. And that is going to help a little bit if you're in a low car with a particularly big speed bump, or a car with large overhangs. So what I mean by an overhang is the wheel of the car isn't at each corner of the car. You've got the wheel and then you've got a bit of bumper after it that overhangs the front or the back of your wheels, and that can hit the raised part of the bump before your wheel does. If you come at it at an angle, that should stop that from happening. Another alternative to speed bumps are these things, where essentially a two-sided road becomes a one-sided road, and you'll get a sign like this: give way to oncoming vehicles. And I've got a line on the road where I have to wait for oncoming vehicles. There are no oncoming vehicles anyway, so I can go through. I was just doing that to show you, and there's no one behind me, so I had time to do that. That's single file, basically, to slow you down, just to create problems to make you go slow. And you've got the blue sign here with the white arrow, and you've got the blue sign, then it's your priority. So now anyone coming the other way would have to wait for me, which is why they have a line on the road, and I've got the blue sign again. So on this one, it's my priority too. So a bit unfair. 2 are my priority, 1 is their priority, but when I go back the other way, the tables would have been turned. So that's all basically. Slow down before the speed bump, come off the brake before you go over the speed bump, and do any gear changes you need to do before you go over the speed bump too, making sure your clutch is up before you get there, because if your clutch is up as you go over the speed bump, your gas works, you have power to make sure you can get up and over that speed bump. You can speed up between the speed bumps and then slow back down again for the next speed bump, despite what the highway code says. If you think the video is helpful, please give it a thumbs up and check out my sponsors in the description, Collingwood and Confused. Collingwood are great if you want to insure yourself on somebody else's car, because you can do so without affecting their policy, which takes away a lot of stress. And Confused.com are really good at providing a very competitive price for new and inexperienced drivers. Please use the links, because that does support the channel, and there is a benefit for you if you use the Collingwood link. Subscribe to get my future videos, and until the next one, cheerio.